124 pages.
Yeah.
Morning, gentlemen.
Morning.
Hey, give it a hard copy to Dave, okay?
Marshall, is my screen active? You can see me?
No, it's not. It's just a blank screen with your name in the corner.
It says my video is active, but I don't see even my name. Oh, oh, you know why?
Looks good to us.
No,
There you go.
on my video camera. I see phones. Oh, wondering why the hell it was black.
Is it a piece of duct tape, Rob?
No, if you look into your computer, there's like a little toggle switch screen that you can keep it full.
Morning, Matt.
Good morning.
Well, I think we got everybody from loan review plus energy, so why don't we start the meeting, we'll call the meeting to order and
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic which stands one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Just for the minutes, could Gary and Brendan identify who you're with and last name, Gary?
Hi, this is Bernie from.
With. Speak up again.
My mic's a little weird. I'm using some very weird headphones. My name's Brendan Straub. I'm a reporter with Channel 7.
Okay, all right, thanks. Okay. Gary, your last name?
Rose.
Okay,
Henderson.
thank you.
Morning, Gary. Morning. Okay, so we already have our March 23rd loan review meeting hearing is called to order. We have an agenda. I think what we've been doing is, as part of this, we let alternative energy subcommittee kind of take the front end of the meeting. Bill, did you have some things you wanted to go through, or is the agenda sufficient?
I think the agenda pretty much covers us. I think the youth act was one of the things we wanted to discuss.
Yeah.
And other projects as well, so I guess. Let's forward on, that's a different idea.
Okay, yeah, I have one question on the unfinished business, other projects, but we clean that up. So we've already done the class. We've got, I guess, 4 applications in front of us. Lyle, we've received application fees for all 4.
I have.
Okay, thank you. I guess we'll just do in the order that are on the agenda, so I'll just read them on. Otterville Road Solar, which is in Henderson, Ray Jackson Solar, which is in Tunnel Ray, Amelia Solar, which is also at the Tunnel Ray, and Waddingham, are they all 3 in Tunnel Ray? Waddingham Solar is in Tunnel Ray also. Amelia is Tunnel, right? Okay. So we should have those 4 packets in front of us. So if we go through Butterville first, Lyle's done his customary home analysis to give us the cost benefit. The application is filled out. One thing that wasn't sent with this package, but was sent prior, was Town of Henderson has already conducted seeker and granted NECDEC. That was in our first packet. It wasn't in this package, so it does exist. And there were some requirements, the letters dated, at the October 6, 2020 meeting, the planning board finalized review and blah, blah, blah. Goes on further. There's about 80 items that may have already been completed, but weren't completed at the time of the letter. So it's met the requirements of local zoning approval, and I think the town of Henderson is still working through some minor mechanical details of decommissioning bonds and this, that, and the other. And that, I believe it's still customary to still review the application. One thing that to not skip over, since we do have a few guests public, were there any comments from the public before we get into the mechanics of this meeting too much? Then Gary, Dallas, and Brandon.
Gary Rhodes, I have no comment.
Okay, thanks. Brandon, you're just listening for comments, right? Okay. We'll make sure we give you a couple of zingers. And Dallas, you're actually with Exia, correct?
And who's Lisa? Could you identify yourself in the minutes, please?
Lisa's iPhone, I'm assuming.
Yes,
Oh, it's our Lisa, okay.
sorry.
Lisa.
I don't have my iPad up, so I had to go old school and use the phone.
Okay.
All right, well, if you see anything or,
I guess the question I would have first, Rob, going back to, today, and why was the application complete now? All these applications that are complete at this point? We're not lacking anything?
Yes, I agree. Yep.
Okay.
Dave, there was some confusion, I think, internally. Your comment about one application not being complete was the one we don't have in front of us, the one on Military Road, correct?
Yeah, I mean, a couple of these, actually, when we first got them, a couple of them weren't signed, they've been signed, and so they're complete now, yeah.
Yeah, I personally didn't see anything that wasn't filled out in these.
Yeah, I didn't either, I just wanted to.
Okay. Yeah, there was that email that made it appear there was more information coming, but I think that was about the Military Road, which we haven't accepted an application nor had been a fee presented for that at this point.
Right.
Okay.
So, Lyle, I do have a question on your analysis. This appears to be the only one. The numbers that are used in your analysis are different than what were in the application. Did you have some different values to determine the equipment and labor?
Essentially, I guess which part of it didn't agree, Rob?
So, it's page 3 of our packet, so you've got your equipment, your state production is like 1,018,000.
Yeah.
Labor is 419, so it totals off to 1.438 million, yet the application says 1.2 something or other million. This is the only one that the numbers on your document are different than what was in the application. All the other ones are consistently identical. I wasn't sure if you had some different information or you were scaling from a 1 megawatt back down to this or something.
Well, on some of the, on the appraisals, I have to do that.
I'm not sure it'll skew it out a lot, but just the numbers weren't, all the other ones did match exactly what was disclosed by Nexamp in their application, so I had that question.
The only thing I can think is that I did this original cost benefit analysis back in August.
Okay,
And maybe they submitted a revised application.
Yeah, this last one wasn't right.
If they did, it didn't get to me.
it's possible, so I would say, based on the outcome of this, we should probably clean it up if it goes to the full board, if it's resolved to do that, we should make a note.
Yeah, I can do that quickly, Rob. It's,
Okay.
should not, what's a couple $100,000, it really shouldn't have any significant impact on the cost.
I don't, other than just for conformity, I don't
Right.
think it has any impact, just,
No, I agree. We'll do that.
okay. Paul Warnick, a question for you. I know we're kind of using an appraisal from, I think it was a 5 megawatt project, and we kind of scaled it down to 1.
I prorated it, yes.
Yeah, so my question, Paul, is it proper to use 80% of the 1 megawatt? It seems to me some costs are gonna be fixed, it wouldn't necessarily decrease. It just seems lower than normal when you look at the starting point. And that was my only other observation I made, and it's kind of a question for the whole board in essence.
There are some, I imagine the cost to get approval for your interconnect are probably similar, but unless we were to go out and get a specific appraisal, one of the concerns we've raised in the past is that as each year passes, the amount of subsidies changes.
Mm-hmm.
So, and we're using an appraisal that I think probably has a higher value for the projects that were done 2 years ago. Then the same project if it was today probably would have different numbers. So it's really hard to say, Rob.
Okay.
That'd be more of a question for next AMP, what are the fixed costs?
Yeah.
You know,
I
they have,
know, like if I already use like our go by 40 to 50% of the construction costs, it kind of comes out lower than Lyle's number, but that also doesn't make sense theoretically because there are certain things that are not going to change regardless of the size of the project.
I don't know how National Grid's fees are for interconnect. That might be a place where the fees are the same, but I can't answer that.
So I mean, me personally, that would be my only other question. I don't know if we can gather data before this goes to the full board if it's resolved to do such. I'm just curious, are we at the right starting point for what we believe the assessment to be for these sub 1 megawatt projects? Because we keep scaling something down that's already 3 years old. So it's kind of at some point, we're gonna have to actually start getting paid appraisals.
Well, at some point, I would hope we get some actual appraisals.
Yeah, well, we've improved enough of these, we gotta get the towns to start doing that.
Yeah. You mentioned fees, Paul. The fees don't affect the appraisal, do they?
The fees for what?
Well, you said National Grid fees.
Well, the total economics of the project are going to take in the total cost of the project. So if the fees for National Grid that they have to pay for an interconnect go up, it's going to have an impact on the cost to finance the project, which will ultimately drive an appraised value. So
Yeah.
how
Okay.
significant that is, as I've said in the past, and Rob sent an email, I'm more concerned about the governor's proposal on how appraisals will be done in the future if that passes the state legislature this year. I think if that passes, we will need to require the first project after that becomes law to get us an appraisal. So.
Dave Zembiak, in one of your emails last evening, you mentioned you were talking to some other IDAs in surrounding counties. I wonder if it would be practical to find out if any of them have like 1 megawatt and below solar projects.
Yeah.
As to real appraisals are.
Yeah, I had not discussed that. I mean, they're all pretty much, as you saw, following a similar formula to us. But
We may see more of these sub 1 megawatts. We may not. But it's, I don't know, the numbers don't make sense.
well, the interesting thing on the Butterville project, because it is so small, that even when you take the per megawatt charge, you're still, if you look at Lyle's analysis sheet, you're actually decreasing the property taxes from what's being paid in the property now.
Yeah.
So I don't know if we need to take a different approach with those, because typically our practice is not to decrease, it's to control any increase in the tax rate.
You lost me on that one, Dave. I mean, the total taxes I saw that are paid are $7,000 on this parcel, and this is taking a small portion of that, several acres of a huge parcel.
Oh, wait, is there something else? Well, are you looking at the whole, when you say the seven, is that the whole parcel or is it just the part of the project based on?
I prorate the acreage for the project.
Well, that is extremely misleading on this parcel. The Butterville project is just a road over brush field. I mean, if you want to talk about the project we've seen where they're really just taking underutilized land, this is probably a classic case of conversion of underutilized land.
And not taking ag land out of production or anything.
No.
I presume what Dave meant was the 100% taxation without pilot, according to this, is about 12,000 in Kerpa as opposed to 7,000. I'm guessing that's what he meant. But as you say, Paul, it's kind of misleading with regards to that's the total acreage. So those are my kind of two main observations. Is I'm not certain if we can gain any intelligence, and maybe even our council can help us in some areas, but I'm not sure the assessment value is the right number. I don't know if it's too high or too low, frankly. I just don't know if it's the right number. It's a number. It doesn't mean it's wrong, Lyle. I'm not sure. Not sure we don't have any data points to confirm it. And then the construction and labor costs don't appear to match what's in the actual application itself. Only on this application. The other ones did match precisely.
Sorry, this is for the Butterville application?
Butterville, yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, Dallas, what we do is, internally, we do a cost benefit analysis. We follow basically a document that's prescribed to us through the IDAs. And we fill out a document, and Lyle Eaton, our CFO, he puts all the figures in, and there's kind of a covering page that helps us do a look back on all of the facts and figures and helps us correlate it to what's in your application and what we've approved or looked at for other projects. And in this one, because it's so small, number one, and number two, some of the numbers didn't exactly match up with what's in your application. So that's why there's some findings.
I'm sorry, when you say the numbers didn't match up, do you need the assumed assessment compared to the construction?
No, for instance, so on page, when you fill out the application, there's a section in here to disclose your construction cost breakdown. So you've disclosed that. You've disclosed how much of it is material, how much is it labor. Those numbers get pushed onto the sheet that we're talking about.
Okay.
But the numbers don't match up. That just on this application. And I think they're unrelated. It's just like Lyle said, he probably did this back in August and you might have put in revised costs and you never picked up on it. The assessment is we're struggling with not having companies like yours every single time you do an application to go pay for it, get an assessment, or excuse me, an appraisal. We're trying to be expedient and utilize what we already have, but we're working off the 5 megawatt projects and scaling traditionally down.
Yeah.
So Dallas, we're taking,
800 kilowatts.
so we're taking $500 per megawatt as our starting point. Since this is only about 0.8 megawatts, we started, instead of 500 using 4,400, 80% of that typical per megawatt charge we use.
Yeah, I mean, I will say we don't have that many projects that have been downsized that much. This project wasn't originally a 5 megawatt project, and National Grid caused us to reduce our size. So we have seen them appraised between 400 and 500,000. But I agree that's more of them just going off of an appraisal that's been done on a larger project and scaling it down to a megawatt basis.
So Dallas, in terms of the interconnect, is that an interconnect issue with National Grid that they have to downsize?
Yeah, so we know going into an application, we have somewhat of an idea if we can connect, but we have to go through a whole study for them to come back and say, I think we had a transformer upgrade on this one. I apologize, these projects have been around for a little bit, so, and it, instead of paying a $2 million upgrade, we can actually connect the 1 megawatt project to the facility.
So in terms of a 5 megawatt or wherever size you go, do you try to scale up to what they can accept without cost, or is there always some costs associated, keep going back to the earlier conversation we had about, the connected costs or, costs that are inherent to all these projects. Is there an escalator cost to them on some of them because of the interconnectability type thing?
I wasn't really understanding why the interconnection would change the appraisal, because it's different for every single project. Like you can get lucky on like 1 3-phase in a substation that's wide open and, connect for relatively cheap. Or on a different project, National Grid can come back and say, you need a substation upgrade, you need 3-phase upgrade. We submit a project and they kind of tell us what we can do. They're a little bit more open, but it's still pretty much like we have to submit an application, go through the study and work with National Grid to connect an application or project.
Dave and John, I think the only other note I made on this particular application is under section 2 projects, other operations in Jefferson County. I thought we already approved Adams Renewable. And of course, some of the other projects are, I don't know that none is the long answer, but there are other pending projects I would suggest. Not built, but.
Adams and Black River, I believe.
Yeah, they're both approved.
Okay, so, and I didn't remember what the status of them is. I thought one was fairly advanced, so I would just, maybe we can make a note on that particular section. There are other operations in Jefferson County. It would be the same comment on all 4 applications.
Both being turned on, hopefully any day now. So, but at the time, I wasn't sure if we should consider them because they're not operational.
Hey, Rob,
Yes, Paul.
just so you know, I did a quick check. This parcel that this is on, the parent parcel is 425 acres and it's assessed at $823,000. So there's the amount of taxes that are paid on this land is going to be significantly higher with the solar than it is as wasteland as part of that overall farm.
Oh, absolutely.
Just to clarify that it's just a tiny portion of a huge parcel.
Yeah. But, and my only comment is, not that they're not wrong, we have no other data points to compare this, contrasting against, because we seem to be scaling everything. And when you're going from 3 and 5 megawatts, it doesn't seem like that big of a deal. You go to 0.8 megawatts. I think there's some certain things that don't downwardly reduce. Maybe there's other things that are eliminated. I just don't have the data to say that with confidence this is a good number. So I guess those are my observations with regards to the application, and possibly staff could reach out to other surrounding counties and see if we have one in, sub 1 appraisals. I know they're not perfect, but at least they're numbers that we could put into our data cloud and contrast this information against.
We do that.
John or Dave, anything else that you observed in the applications or the cost benefit analysis?
I think you've covered it, Rob.
Okay.
So I would check my guess, and I didn't, like I said, I didn't ask specifically about those sub 1 megawatt projects. My guess is they're going to be, like we did here, pretty much, I'm good thing they're going to stay with the same format, just prorated.
Yeah.
That's my sense from the overall discussions I've had with some of the other.
Yeah.
I just went back and looked at the original assessment that we got. I forget, Paul, what was the guy's name that did the appraisal for us?
Zukowski.
But some of the inputs are like O&M, insurance, administration, management, decommissioning, and all those costs are per megawatt or per kilowatt value. So again, I'm not positive that they scale down to that, but they are based on a kilowatt value. So like that's the way he did it. Like he's got like $2 per kilowatt for insurance.
Yeah.
They're not
Hey,
making it
Bill,
better,
Bill or Paul or John from the Energy Committee, a question, when we initially started down this path, I know for like wind projects, we came up with a number like 1.3 million or 1.6 million per megawatt. Was that similar for solar?
No, solar was lower.
Do you remember how much?
Well, we were like 1.6 for wind and we're at 8, just under 900,000 our appraised value for the solar. It's the output's different. The solar has per installed nameplate capacity, a solar facility will create less in a year than a wind farm will.
So you're saying 900,000 megawatts?
Well, we were 800 and change.
Okay.
I think we were 880 maybe, Bill, 890 per megawatt in the appraisal we had.
What's it at, 1.7?
It was, I think it was 894.
Yeah, it was 4 point something for a 5 megawatt farm. So
4,470,000. That divides down to about 8.9 per megawatt.
Okay. So, I mean, the assessment value that's on here might not be terribly wrong. Not that I was saying it was terribly wrong.
And there's a difference if they're articulated panels versus stationary panels too. We had a lower value per megawatt in the original Shimo appraisal because they were not articulated panels.
Yeah.
The higher income.
So I think that if we can clean up the cost of benefit analysis and maybe confirm the assessment projection that's in here is legitimate to what we just got done speaking about and what maybe other surrounding counties have achieved for smaller projects. Don't personally have anything else on this particular application. I don't know if anyone else has anything to share or.
I think you covered it, Rob.
Okay. Well, of course, we'll do these one at a time. So, I guess John or Dave, do we have a motion to bring this to the full board for consideration?
I think a motion to move it to the board.
Okay, and second?
Yes, I'll
Okay,
second.
all in favor? Aye?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, so Butterville will move to the full board with a request for staff to correct the cost benefit analysis to match what's in the application and see if we can obtain, some data points on what a 1 megawatt or sub 1 megawatt project would be assessed at. Okay, we'll move on to Luray Jackson Solar on Van Tassel Road in Evans Mills. Again, this one, the package that we were sent was neglected to include the neg deck from Luray. It was a unconditioned neg deck, and it was included, so that's proof that it's met local zoning and whatever requirements. Again, there were a few things that were left to be done. This is dated July 13th, 2020. They could already be done. They needed a road maintenance agreement, decommissioning bonds. There's a few things that were required. They may have already been submitted, but that's between the Luray and Nexam. So the cost benefit analysis that was submitted does match the values that are in the application. And we've already gone through a couple other things. John or Dave or anyone, anything to offer on these items? This application, excuse me?
No, I don't have anything.
Nope.
Okay. So what we, again, for the public, we have a cost benefit analysis. We go through it and put in the project costs. We apply the 5,500 megawatt, invert it, start out year one higher than year 15. And we come up with approximately 50% tax abatement, which is what the UTEP allows. This is taking into account all the, all the different criteria that were disclosed to us, and there's nothing really peculiar about this one. This is a 5 megawatt project, I believe, right? Yeah, 5 megawatt. While I see you put a question in the cost analysis, you were questioning the labor cost relative to the material cost. It doesn't affect the total cost to us, but you were questioning to that.
Yeah, we were trying to get a good handle on calculating the sales tax benefit. And my question there was, is 40% of that installation cost taxable, 60% being labor? We don't really know. I don't have a good breakdown on it yet. That was, I make little notes on this occasionally,
Okay.
remind me.
I think we can maybe ask Nexamp to look at that. They're disclosing 35 construction jobs. When you work out a normal work week with some overtime, it's about a 25-week project, 44,000 labor hours. When you divide the hours by the disclosed construction labor costs, it's not an exorbitant per hour cost when you load it with all benefits and fringes and payroll taxes. So it may very well be that.
That's a standard we've used on the non-energy cost benefit analysis.
Yeah.
I don't know if it applies here or not.
Yeah, this may be a tougher lot to drill and set. I think there's nothing but rock up there.
Yeah.
Like everywhere in Jefferson County, it seems, but there's not good planting soil, there's rock.
I'll agree with that.
And for the committee's justification, to be clear, Council for Nexamp withdrew the sales tax exemption request for each of the 4 applications being considered. So the cost benefit analysis that involves sales tax would not need to be completed.
Okay, thanks, Matt.
Yeah.
With that clarification, we should have the applications cleaned up on all 4 of them before they, if the next 3 go to the full board, the one that we already resolved, it should get cleaned up. So we have the proper data in front of our board at the next board hearing. John or Dave or any other board members, anything to add? Or is there a motion to move this to the full board for further evaluation and discussion?
I'll move it to the full board.
Okay, second?
No, second.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, so we will move Nexamp, Larray, Jackson, Nevins Mills to the full board for further discussion, with the clarification just offered by Council Most, to update the application to remove the sales tax.
I did not include the sales tax, Rob.
Okay, but the applications that were submitted to us do actually check mortgage reporting tax,
Right.
sales tax exemptions requested, so we might well. I should ask a clarification, Council. They are keeping the mortgage reporting tax request intact?
Correct. So they're seeking both the real property tax exemption and the mortgage recording tax exemption. And their email, could be viewed as a modification of the applications if the committee were to accept it.
Yeah, I mean, if it's disclosed to us, we can take it that way, that's fine, because you're the one that drafts the resolution anyway, so as long as you know about it, that's the important thing. Okay, moving on, order Amelia Solar on County Route 32 at the intersection of 342 in the town of Watertown. So it's in the town of Amelia, good. Watertown, sorry. So again, what wasn't included in our board package was there was variance, granted through the zoning law, and then a neg deck. So we have all of that from November of last year. So we have all of that. And we have our application the size of this project?
5 megawatts.
5 megawatts.
Again, in the cost breakdown, there's almost 46,000 construction hours, while you made the same note about the labor costs are higher in this particular one, but the per hour construction costs don't seem terribly abnormal when you divide the hours with the disclosed construction cost. We have the disclosure of the material value, those are both brought forth in your cost analysis sheet. And again, we start with the 5,500 times 5, invert it with an escalator, so year one payment is higher. And we have all of those numbers in front of us. We have the same requirement to clean up the application to remove, or if we're going to use the letter. There's no sales tax requirement, sales tax exemption requirement. John or Dave or any other board members, anything to discuss on this cost analysis?
I'll move it to the board.
Okay, second?
I'll second.
Okay, all in favor, aye?
Aye.
Okay, so we will move next in, Camellia Solar, Town of Camellia to the full board, for further consideration. And lastly, next amp, Rottingham Road in Evans Mills, Town of Luray. Again, what was not included in this board packet, but was sent prior, June 5th, 2020, Town of Luray issued a letter. There was a neck deck enclosed, so proof that it's met town zoning requirements. There's a few matters like the other one, road maintenance agreement, decommissioning agreement, and a bond to be satisfied. Maybe they have since such been, but that letter is in our files. This is a, what is this, 3 point something or other megawatt?
4
megawatt.
4 megawatt? Yeah, 4 megawatt, yeah, can't do math today, sorry. So, all the numbers were brought forward from the application on the covering page, and I do have a question. I think it's, I think I know the answer, but I thought I would ask. In each of the applications, there's a different year established, and I assume it's not the year Nexamp Capital was established, it's when these applicant names were established, like Rottingham Road Solar LLC. Dallas, is that? Yeah, okay, thanks.
Yeah, they still fall under Nexamp, they're just subsidiaries of us.
Okay, there's a lot of different years established, and like, okay, at first I thought they were wrong, and then I'm like, oh, this is when the applicant established themselves.
Some just take a little longer than others.
Yes, well, it takes my mind a little longer to comprehend things some days. So, again, Lyle's got the same note, but it is the labor cost that was disclosed in the application. And since sales tax isn't applicable, it becomes irrelevant. It's just a number. And Dave or John, or anyone from the board, anything to discuss in this particular application or benefit analysis?
No, I don't.
No.
We have a motion to move it to the full board.
Make a motion to move it to the full board.
Okay. A second, please.
Yes, I'll second.
Okay, all in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Okay, so we will move next in, Rottingham Road to the full board for further discussion, of the required exemptions.
Dallas, just a couple questions. So the next step is intend to retain ownership of the project once they're done, or selling them, or what's the plan after that?
Yeah, so we don't sell our projects, we operate on them afterwards. These projects, once we go into construction, we'll start to subscribe, because we do community solar in-house. You guys want to, I'm sure some of you may have gotten like a postcard or something that says, sign up for community solar with us, so we own and operate them in-house.
And just more general status, So the decommissioning plan, all the other stuff required at the town level, anything still outstanding there?
Nothing's outstanding with, any of the towns. We actually got our zoning permit from the town of Luray, for Luray Jackson and Waddingham, and then Familia, it was just a decommissioning bond. Everything is, taken care of on all those projects.
And the Henderson project, was that one, you got everything satisfied?
Yes, everything has been satisfied.
Okay, unfinished business, before we go to the draft UTEP, I have a question. Where are we with the, I don't know if they're called Omni or US Light, they were delayed, are those back in the active file, or are they still delayed?
Unless Matt's heard something, the last,
Promoters or staff?
unless Matt's heard something more recent, the last, note I had from Peter McAuliffe was that they expected, this was about a week ago, it was in the next 30 or 60 days, they would be ready to
Okay.
close.
So there was just a short delay, not
Yes,
a,
right.
not a longer delay, okay.
Harvey J and B.
I think those are the only ones that were approved.
Yes.
Yeah, we didn't kind of get to closing yet. All the other ones, I think they've already gone to the point of, closing, looking at the, our listing of all the projects. Okay, so.
Rob, I can report that the two US Light Energy projects, Carthage A and Carthage B on Route 26, have been fully documented in draft and have been sent to council for review. So we anticipate closing those in the next couple of weeks if the council gets back to us on that. For the two Omni projects that Peter McAuliffe is involved in, those have been fully drafted. They're ready to go as soon as Omni is ready to go. And then there's a third project, if you recall, that Omni presented but sold to a company, I believe, called AMP Energy. And they were awaiting a letter from them to say that they have taken over that project and want to proceed to closing with board approval of the transfer from Omni to them.
Okay, yeah, I forgot about that one.
Yeah, we've not received that letter yet, though, I don't think, have we, Matt?
No,
All right. But they've already made it through our process. We're just waiting for some of the final closing documents.
correct.
Very good. So I think the next, unless there's any other or unfinished business that any other board or committee members want to share or staff? No?
I don't know if this is the time, but there's no update, Dave, or anybody as far as the project here in mine. We've heard nothing.
Which project?
Small.
Oh, no, nothing.
There's been some discussion, we have a draft UTEP, we're looking at making it more robust with regards to renewable, I think more specifically solar, adding in some different sections to areas and facts that we've learned and to try to get more information. So, Dave Zembiak, well, this was in our board packet. There were some questions back and forth about different areas to add in. I guess I'll just make a comment that we have a copy of the draft UTEP. I don't know how much time we want to spend on it right now. More of a full board issue, but clearly it's got to have a clearinghouse to get to the full board. Does anyone have any comments thus far with regards to what's been presented?
I do, and I haven't had a chance to submit them to Dave yet, but I can go over, I have 4 or 5, I think they're minor. Do you want to go over them now?
Well, it's on the agenda, so yeah, let's go over, and we can, well, because I have about 3 or 4 myself, and you might have the same 3 or 4 or 5. Go right ahead.
Well, and then I'll look for comments from Matt coming back. My first comment is on page 2 of the, where Page 2 is item number 2, renewable energy projects, and that's where we established 25 megawatts as our cutoff, as projects we'll consider. And my suggestion would be to lower that to 20 megawatts because projects of 20 megawatts or greater can opt into ORES, the Office of Renewable Energy Standards review, which takes it out of the local jurisdictions, which I think was a lot of what our concerns were. You know, the projects we just discussed were all approved at the local level. And there's a lot of concerns about when ORES takes it over, the voices that only not residents have, but the community as a whole would have will be lost. So I wondered we should lower it to the 20 megawatts or put something in there that projects that opt for the ORES review will be considered deviations. That was my first comment. Dead silence.
It's a good comment. I had a similar one.
All these projects we've done to date, like even though NextAmp has just done almost 20 megawatts today, or 15, 16, they're all considered 5 megawatt projects. And when we did Oya up on the river, those were 4 or 5 megawatts, and they wouldn't be affected of this. It's where they're doing utility scale or distributed energy, I think would be the correct term for them. Megawatts or greater is what I'm suggesting. I just think we need to be a little more diligent on these projects that the state's taking review rights away from the local governments.
And so for the OERS process, is that 20 and above or is it over 20?
It's automatically, and Matt, you can correct me, it's automatically for projects 25 megawatts or greater, but projects 20 megawatts can opt into that review, Matt?
I'd have to look at the executive law, but I'm familiar with that opt-in process. I just don't know what the cutoffs are. But so you could say your modification could allude to executive law 94C and whatever its requirements are for that code.
That's probably the fair way to do it, because currently Article 10 didn't disappear yet. It may never, I don't know, none of us know. So if it's less than 25 megawatts and still under Article 10, there's a local voice that we as a board agreed was important to be part of the process. 94C has potentially lowered that threshold to 20 megawatts and maybe, or maybe not, taken some of the local voice away. That's, I think, what Paul was summarizing. That's probably a good way to just have it match up with the executive order.
I'll check into that. We'll adjust that accordingly.
My second comment would be under there. It reads to estimate the annual pilot payments. The agency will determine a dollar value per AC megawatt. I just wonder if that should be just read the agency will determine. That's okay, man. I'll send these along to you, Dave.
Okay, all right, okay, we got it.
D, it says any participation by the agency in sponsoring a renewable energy facility project. You had the word shall, and I think we should make that may, so it's not mandatory. Take into account whether a project has entered into one or more host community agreements, and I say that because under 94C, the state has the ability to negotiate outside of everybody else a host community agreement, if I read the language in 94C correctly. So I think we should make that discretionary instead of mandatory language.
Okay.
I don't know what Matt thinks about that.
I think that makes sense. And 94C is clearly set up, as you say, to account for all payments from a project to the host community, whether in the form of a host community benefit agreement, a pilot payment, or through the energy that certain projects of a certain size must pay to the community.
And my last thing in that section was creating a paragraph. And this has mostly to do with the larger projects because it really hasn't been an issue to date where their permits are issued locally. And no application for incentives will be accepted until all permits are in place. That's happened on all our projects that had their permits in place when we've finalized or induced them. I'm concerned about, until we've been through one or two of these 94C reviews, we're not going to know what to expect. And I'm not sure we should commit to supporting incentives to a project till we see how they treat local government and residents' concerns. So that may not be necessary since it's a litigation for a large project.
Paul, in response to that, I would say developers would not be pleased with waiting until the result of the state level review of a project before coming to see you. I think a lot of developers want to know early in that process whether they have a viable project economically with the host community before spending the money to press through the very expensive state level review and environmental, I guess, audit and review process that they're required to go through. So it's very common for projects to pursue IDA financial assistance well before they receive an Article 10 permit, or we haven't seen any 94C permits yet, but that's commonplace across the state.
I'll have to think about that some more, Matt, because my concern once again is 94C basically, to me, is an expedited review that's intended to remove some of the oversight by local governments. While they could still opine on it, they could still override local zoning. They can ignore the impacts. I mean, one thing that should concern all of us is if they determine there's a non-mitigatable impact, they can just ask the developer to write a check to offset that mitigation. And that may be acceptable to the community, it may not be. So to give final approval till we see how the permit is written and what actually the community is going to be getting, I just have concerns. So I understand what you're saying. That's just my suggestion at your point, at this point.
Well, the other thing I'd point out too is if we're talking about a provision in there for the large project, at this point, we haven't determined if we're going to be, what we're going to be doing for pilots for large scale projects.
Okay. I'm just raising
that question. I mean, how you want to address that.
And on deviations, we've talked about this several times, and most of it was before Matt came on board as our special counsel. But Section 858.4 of the General Municipal Law requires that we ensure that any place that we take title, a lease, or some sort of ownership, that we're required to ensure that our project complies with local zoning and planning regulations. And I suggest we just make a reference that projects must be in compliance with local and zoning and planning regulations pursuant to 858 sub 4 of the Act.
Yeah, and the project documents make clear, they incorporate that requirement, Paul, and the way it works with a large scale project is the project simply can't go forward until that permit is issued. It's a condition to the IDA benefits flowing to the project.
Okay. The others, I'm down, I don't see a page, I'm on page 4. I've talked several times, some of us have talked about trying to hit, and this could be coming back out of the UTEP and into, project documents like Matt just mentioned. Establish some sort of reporting so we can see exactly where the labor force is coming from. And after hearing, that probably doesn't belong in the UTEP and more into project documents. It'd be nice to see, total labor expenditure by zip code, so we can see that really local labor, to the best they can, is being used.
Yeah, and that is also captured in the project documents in terms of an annual employment reporting requirement. And if the IDA has a form that it would like to use for that reporting, we could either incorporate that into the project documents, which would be the agency lease and project agreement, or the IDA can simply provide the form of that report to project occupants for their reporting requirements as they go through the life cycle of the project.
The reason I bring that up, and we talk about annual reporting, not just mentioned annual reporting, year or two after they go live, there's virtually no employment.
Right.
The employment the employment numbers we need to capture are truly construction jobs.
Yep.
So that when we justify supporting the project, is the only thing we're really supporting is construction job creation. And I forget what, the agency may offer sales tax and use tax exemptions for qualified projects undertaken by the agency. I forget what was there before I highlighted that.
Were you looking, page 4, D?
D is in sales tax and sales and use tax exemption.
Yeah, I didn't make any changes there, so let's see. It was
And that is pretty much the end of items I wrote in.
Paul, what was the statement under D you were just referring to?
How did it, in your amendments, how did it read, Dave?
I didn't make any changes to that section.
So it currently says the agency may?
Yes.
Okay. I guess that's my only comments.
But we can change it. I mean, it's all for grabs at this point.
The other ones I had that Paul didn't already cover, these were from prior email discussions of capturing things that Dave would put into the draft UTEP. There was a question, or maybe a very minor discussion, transmission as part of renewable energy. It may already be an excluded project and not qualified to receive exemptions, and maybe that's a question more for Matt. Is transmission, if it were part of renewable energy, is it a qualified project that could obtain any form of exemption?
Yeah, it definitely qualifies under the general municipal law as either part of the renewable energy project or a standalone. You can do a project for an industrial transmission.
Okay. But I think one board member brought up we should specifically exclude transmission. I think because it has a whole different siting process. But again, that wasn't mentioned, it wasn't captured, so just to keep that discussion alive to affirm or deny its inclusion.
So, I mean, the way our UTIP was written, it talks about what's allowed, it doesn't really talk about what's excluded. I wasn't here part of the background. I know that the board decided some time ago not to do transmission projects, but I mean, as Matt says, you can do them because we had a few years back, somebody that were on the board would recall, Lewis County was doing a pilot for a transmission line for the wind farm over in Copenhagen. That transmission line actually extended into Jefferson County, and they got permission from the town of Champion and from Jefferson County to apply that pilot under Lewis County's auspices, even under part of the transmission line that was in Jefferson County.
Yeah, and I agree with you, Dave. It's only what's allowed, but then it leaves the ambiguity of when you just say number 2, renewable energy projects. If transmission is part of a renewable energy project, it's therefore allowed.
Right. Okay.
So my only question is if the board feels we should exclude transmission under your new number 2, we can actually, where the megawatt cutoff is and say, and shall exclude all transmission. And I don't think it does anything with the substations and all the other type of stuff, but it's really a board discussion. It didn't get captured out of the comments, and so I was just picking that up. I really have a strong preference one way or the other. I feel it's a deviation regardless, but I'd rather be clear it's a deviation than unclear it's part of the project.
You're right, within the context of that new section, I think it would be appropriate to say excluding transmission. One thing I was gonna point out is that I left vague, I'm referring to the renewable energy projects. Some of the, IDA tests where they're doing renewable energy, they talk about including wind, hydro, solar, and all of this specifically referring just to solar. So that's another question for discussion, is how, if you want to keep this just to solar, or if you want to adapt, apply this to renewable energy projects in general.
Just another comment that, again, it wasn't, these are just comments that were made by others previously and I didn't see showing up. There was a discussion about the use of agricultural land on what I'll say highly graded soils, and I'm probably describing this poorly, but we've already identified there's certain attributes in our county that are more important to state as agricultural uses, and we don't want them to become something else. It's not an agricultural uses or a dual use necessarily. So, Dave, I know you brought Dembiak, I know you brought up Lewis County's doing it a particular way, and we didn't really have a full and robust discussion about that. But I do think there needs to be some measure if prime farmlands are taken out of circulation. It shouldn't necessarily just be part of the 5,500 megawatt and go for it, because it certainly degrades our county in another respect. So I don't have an answer of where to put it or how to address it. It's just a piece of the discussion that we didn't have yet.
Right, we do need that discussion, yes.
Okay. The other.
Hey, Rob,
Go ahead, Dave.
let's step back to the transmission for a minute. I think, the county's already came on board with the Copenhagen that transmission line and went along with the pilot down there. So I don't know, do we, stick with what the county's already kind of agreed to start with, or?
Again, I really have no preference one way or the other. It's ambiguous. Is transmission included in the UTEP or not? It should be a qualified project, and because it's not mentioned and we call it a renewable energy project, a project in its totality could include transmission. Maybe we don't want it to include transmission. And I personally have no opinion one way or the other. It's not clear to me. Is it included or isn't?
Probably mine. I think when I think of a renewable energy project, that includes all the collection lines and whatever transmission it is to the interconnect. Once you leave the interconnect, I think it's a different definition of what that facility is. That's transmission. I think within all the collection lines, and there'll be a lot on some of these large solar farms that take up hundreds or even thousands of acres. Those collection lines are one thing. I guess if it is an allowed use under general municipal law, and we get an application for a transmission line, we can always say that since it, that it's 100% taxation based upon an assessed value. I mean, we get to determine what the pilot taxes would be on that.
Yeah, and again, I have no issue one way or the other. Just to me, it's a separate application. If there is something more genuine as a transmission versus a renewable energy project, if you're talking collections and substations, that's one thing. We're talking a couple hundreds of yards of stuff. You get into these larger projects, you could be in the miles, realistically. It is one a collection versus transmission. It's like, anyway, it's just a matter of when we got into some of those wind farms earlier on, is the transmission lines that really hurt the public more so than anything else, which is odd. But if there's a a separate application for a legitimate transition. And again, by state law, public utilities are the ones who handle all the transmission stuff. I mean, I have no idea what our state's gonna do, going forward, because they don't seem to really have a rule book. That's probably being polite.
Hey, Rob,
Yes.
I need to jump off here, but I did have one comment.
Go ahead.
I don't know if this falls under